Everyone should please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you and welcome everyone. So for announcements, just want to bring to everyone's attention that Tom Templeton and Jason Vigiani cannot be here tonight. Also, prior to this meeting beginning, we were returning from executive session where we discussed collective bargaining negotiations. And with that, I have no more announcements. Can I have a motion to adopt tonight's agenda? First is Gusta, second is Stacy. All in favor? It is 5 in favor. Thank you. And we'll move into the superintendent's report. Oh, actually, before we do that, I need to make one statement. Tonight's meeting is a budget development meeting, and so there are no public comments at a budget development meeting. It's essentially a study session. Residents may attend the next scheduled business meeting on April 9th and or contact the board via email at boe@shenschools.org with any comments or questions. All questions come into the Office of Public Information Officer and are shared with the board and or superintendent as appropriate. Policy questions or concerns are typically addressed by the board president. Operational questions or concerns are typically addressed by the superintendent and or designate. Please.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Hoffman. So tonight we have two presentations. The first is bus purchase resolution, and we have with us Al Karam and Belinda Govich who will be going through that presentation. And so Al, I'll pull it up and I'll drive. How's that for fun?
Good, very good. You do a better job driving.
And I'm sad this is the last one that you're gonna do.
This is the last one.
Whatever, Al.
No. We may find a way to rope it back in and do something. There's a lot of work to be done.
I'm just off exit 8. Give me a call. You need to.
You heard it here.
Okay, so thank you for the opportunity to come in front of you again and talk bus proposition. Just want to remind you what we've done since we last met. We continue to work with our partners, ranging from our consultant, Bernice Technology, National Grid reps, NYSERDA reps, and others as we learn to navigate this complex process of bus purchase. And it is complex, where we talk about infrastructure improvement, power generation, and also potential funded offsets. Our latest meeting was held on February 23rd, and our next meeting is March the 15th with the superintendent. This slide is an update on the last bus purchase. Since the last update we gave the board on the electric buses, the 4 electric buses have been ordered. Their build date, according to our vendor, is April 2024, and the anticipated delivery will be sometime this summer, either June or July of 2024. We've also installed 2 3-phase electrical outlets to support 2 portable chargers for use in this shop. These mobile chargers will serve as a temporary solution for charging the 4 e-buses until the 2 permanent chargers are installed. And by the way, today, made some notes. We got approval from SED to move forward with the construction and installation of those 2 permanent chargers. So we'll move on to that next phase. We also applied for the New York State Bus Incentive Program voucher through
Before you pick that up,
Yep.
Can you just take one step back a little bit on the 2 chargers, because that's an important part. Right now, that's where we have max power capacity to do. And Al mentioned that we have 4 in order. We can't get the other 2 until we figure out another way to get power to power up the other 2. And we're working on something right now. We're meeting Friday with Niagara Mohawk to hopefully potentially get some additional power capacity to do more. So I say that because at this point, I don't know what's real. They have thoughts on what they can potentially do, which, how they use power, when they use power, high peak, low peak, things of that nature. Because we're pretty much maxed out power-wise on the campus to do so. So so that's a key piece of it, that we have to figure that power piece out. And as I said, we have, Al and I, we're meeting on Friday to talk to engineers about the project that was approved, and then talk about this potential idea that NIMO has to hopefully be able to swap out some power usage so we can expand our capacity even more so. So, important piece to make, important point to make.
What would the timing be on that? Or is it more to align it with the bus purchases?
No, it's just, quite frankly, the timing, we can't do anything with buses until we get power.
Right.
So,
So you have two that are planned
Yes.
as part of this grant?
yes.
Okay.
And we have to figure out another way to get additional power before we get the other two, plus any additional that we wanna get.
So I guess to put it another way, we only have enough current power to charge 2 buses at one time.
Correct.
And that's it, we can't even charge 3
Correct.
buses.
And how the vendors do it, they're not gonna build your buses until they have
So,
proof of power, unless in the grant, same thing. They're gonna go to that.
no, let me just clarify. We have 2 mobile chargers.
Right.
And right now we can only do 2 buses at a time because of the 2 chargers, right? They only have 1 charging port each. When we get the 2 permanent chargers installed, they each have 2 ports.
So we're going 4.
Then we can charge the 4 buses. The difference between the 2 mobile is they're 50 kilowatt chargers. So we can actually juice up a 50 kilowatt per hour into those batteries on those buses. The permanent ones, they're 60 kilowatt, but we're gonna split that at
So it's
30-30. The power capacity that we have will tap out, whether the 2 mobile or the 2 permanent. That's it. We can't have any more electric buses until we figure out what that next step is to bring in more electricity, and that is what Dr. Robinson alluded to when we meet up with National Grid. They have an idea. They want us to be like the first in the state to maybe go for it. So we'll listen to them, see what they got. If it makes sense, we will certainly.
But the current situation is with the 250s, that there's not enough for the 250s at once? Or is there not enough for the
No, there
260s
is.
at
For the
once?
250s at once.
For the
or-
250s at once,
or
okay.
But it won't be enough for the 250s and the 260s.
And the 260s, right?
Okay,
So we're
Yeah.
topping out at 120.
Exactly.
That's what you're saying.
Exactly, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, we're at peak capacity in power right now. Until we have this conversation with NIMO to see what they're coming up with.
You keep saying NIMO, it's not grid.
National Grid, I call it
I
NIMO.
heard first you said
NIMO
Mohawk, which I enjoyed.
So NIMO, Mohawk, say NIMO, so you're not, a long time ago, that's what they were called. They
No, I
were
know,
National
I
Grid.
remember.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry, so I gotta call the right name.
Don't apologize.
Kind of complex.
You've been around a
I
while.
heard your reference.
It's like Spectrum and Time Warner, one and the same.
So the good news is we did get approved for the NYSERDA voucher for $882,000. Just to give you the percentage, that's 44.5% of what the cost is for the 4 electric buses, which is 1.98 million. So the district is now on the hook for $1,094,000. The $88,000 will be paid directly to the vendor. That's how that works. Slide 4, please.
And actually, the timing on that is also, because we were gonna bond that, we were gonna take out
Correct,
a
so we
loan
have to
for,
do less.
we have to do less.
Or when we get to the end of the year, then we say that we potentially use some fund balance, pay off and not bond at all.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
You mean with the unappropriated?
Yes, correct.
Okay,
Because debt service is a thing we have to watch
Yeah.
moving forward.
Yeah,
There's some projects coming down the pipe.
well, with 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay.
And so we continue working on funding opportunities to reduce the overall cost for the grid side and for hopefully on the meter side, which is our side of the electrical grid upgrades to help us meet the future power needs of the fleet. The 2 meetings I mentioned on slide 2 are designed to help us develop a roadmap for an eventual referendum for the infrastructure upgrade. Next slide, please.
And I'm just doing a call for Al, just even today, Al was on a webinar with this grant that's out there that, the governor announced this great grant for charging capacity.
Right.
So we're trying to understand what does that mean? What's the application process for that? What are the conditions for that? So I'm sharing it with the board because all these opportunities that you hear out on the news, we're in those conversations, in those meetings, trying to figure out how can we maximize or capitalize on those opportunities.
And they are complex. There's a lot of parameters on them. There's an opportunity for either 25,000 per charger or 55,000 per charger, but there's all sorts of things that you gotta do. And of course, all this, you gotta bring it in sync with, getting SED to approve your construction, working with National Grid to provide the capacity. It's a tug of war between all of them, and so trying to come up with a roadmap that's gonna make sense for us to actually get back on track of doing a thoughtful bus replacement plan for the fleet, which is really for me, the eventual outcome. It doesn't matter what type of buses they are, and right now, it's really in a state of flux.
And the last thing related to this, before we go to bus replacement, Al and potentially, he's gonna kill me if I forgot the name. What's the head mechanic name again?
George
George.
Gill.
George, yeah. And maybe one other folks from Trans, the collaborative through the Capital Region BOCES, trying to get a single vendor through RFP process to really try to look at, so we have our consultants. So where we are at Shen, we're ahead of most places because we went early. We got a consultant from the beginning to help us navigate this process. And so now BOCES region are trying to get a consultant to look at it to not only from a regional perspective, what's some of the regional economies of scale, because there's a lot of conversation out there about, can there be regional power capacity, cost sharing, regional. So there's a lot of regional conversations, and it's great if it works. So we want to be a part of those conversations. So I know Al for sure, potentially George and one other, because we are so invested in the process already, to bring some of our knowledge to that conversation. And so that's another upcoming piece. So I'm sharing with you as a board, even from the public, that not only are we trying to figure out what we do here at Shen, but we're trying to figure out then how do we influence some of the regional conversation, or be a part of the regional conversation. So if there are regional opportunities we can look to take part of, particularly since we are the largest, by far, other than CDTA, the largest transportation fleet in the region. So clearly we have a bigger, larger stake in this conversation than most people.
Can I just confirm / clarify? So whatever infrastructure upgrade grid comes up with, we have to pay for part of that, right? That's
Right now,
my understanding.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah,
And that can be very expensive.
yes.
Yes.
And so again, if you don't mind. So one of the things, there's a lot of capital project moving parts potential, right? And so we have the building condition survey that the board heard about. That's basically all the maintenance stuff related to all our buildings, right? The architect shared out. So we're meeting, I think that's on Friday, and then you either before or after, one of the two, to unpack that thing and come down to a manageable between what we can do budgetary wise to our maintenance, what we could do from a capital project, and is it a phase that out because we can be at $90 million just like that, or do we do $40-50 million related to those kind of things? If or when we do a capital project, we have to consider power piece, and that's the reason why we have all these conversations now, in-depth conversation with NIMO, to truly understand with National Grid to truly understand what they can do, will do, at what price point, what are we required to do, and then how does that fit into a capital project referendum? Because all these things, before we even get to the money, it's the timing of submission to the state, the planning, the design, the timing. That's 24, 36-month process easily, and yet the timeline is triggered. If you recently read, there's a lot more traction now, even at the legislative level. I don't think the law is going to change, but I think a lot of people recognize that, and you're going to see here, 2027 is going to come, and people still going to have to buy your traditional gas buses, period. And that's what we're proposing even tonight. And 2035 may come, and we still be buying traditional gas buses because of the power piece and the cost of buses. It's cost prohibitive to go out and buy. Last year the amount of money we spent for 4 buses is almost equivalent of what we're asking now for 18 buses. So those kind of things we have to balance, but yet we have to replace our fleet, as Al was talking about, because we can't have 2 or 3 years of buses that's down, hoping that at some point we have a better path forward with a complete fleet of electric buses. So it is a mixed bag, if you will, a quilt, a patchwork quilt that we're trying to put the pieces together, and hopefully at the end of it all work together in sync. So that's what we're trying to do.
So I'm also curious, how is the state reconciling this as far as transportation aid and things like that?
That's sorry, Al. We, Dr. Wilson Turner and I, we were down, this past weekend, Sunday and Monday, at Niscus, and we met with, SCD folks. There's a young guy, he's just absolutely overwhelmed, God bless his soul. He's the person that's trying to organize this for the state. And so they sent out a survey, that Al completed, SCD, trying to collect data in terms of where places are right now. And once they get that data, then he's gonna put out a report to say, okay, based on what we know, here are where people are, here are the pitfalls people identified, blah, 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 things of that nature. A big part of the conversation was transportation aid versus capital project aid. And so they just sent out a Q&A document to try to reconcile where does that line get blurred. And the part of that blur is the electrical piece coming in, because when we bring power into the district, it could be used in multiple different ways, right? And so what is that, was that reconcile? So there still needs some reconciliation related to that. The obvious pieces such as upgrade to the fleet, the charger, those kind of things fall into that piece of it. But there's still some gray, because quite frankly, it hasn't happened before. And the scale of it hasn't happened before, which is a bigger piece of it is, before we used to get 60% on a $170,000 bus, now it's 60% on a $500,000 bus. And so the scale of that is also a big concern in terms of what the legislative budget piece is gonna look like for this, regardless if it's capital project or transportation, because for us, it's almost a similar percentage for eligible expenses.
Oh, okay.
So that's, and for places that, the Johannesburg Schenectady is where we get 95% aid reimbursement on it. It's a huge, so it's a big conversation that's taking place right now. And in the meantime, we still have to do our traditional moving forward, so that's what you're gonna hear from Al.
We're still gonna move kids.
Traditional moving forward piece.
So this slide, you've seen it before, what goes into our decision making when we decide on replacing the buses. And again, I'll just reiterate that we have to remain focused on the mandate for the fleet conversion. 2035 might seem like it's a long way off, but in planning for planning purposes, it's not. It'll be on us before you know it. This chart shows you how many buses we've purchased over the years, and you can see the dip. 21, 22, 22, 23. The reason we dipped there is the fleet was really, and it still is, in a good place in terms of the average age of a bus. And so we took advantage of that to upgrade grounds and maintenance and other vehicles, security vehicles, what have you. And of course, last year we concentrated on the 4 electric buses and 5 small buses. But now we need to get back to business of making sure that the fleet remains a healthy fleet and the age of the buses doesn't get out of hand, because in our profession, the older the vehicle gets, the more maintenance is going to require, which then will end up paying more money on the back end of the life cycle of that bus, which we really don't want. So
Al, just one
yeah.
Right now, the industry standard about seven years, but we go a little bit longer than that.
We're in terms of the average age?
Yeah, before replacement.
Well, so the replacement cycle for us at Shen, it's 9 years for the small buses, 12 for the largest buses. It used to be 7 and 10, and because of the support that the board has given transportation in the replacement plan, we were able to have a younger fleet, which allowed us to then move to a 9 and 12 replacement plan, still maintaining a young fleet. So a lot of buses are still under warranty, quite a bit of them, which helps in the cost of the overall maintenance. And that's what we want to maintain. We don't want to get out of hand. And that's my concern with this electric bus thing. If we can't get our arms around it by 2027 and we're forced into either electric or nothing, there's going to be a lot of problems, a lot of operational problems.
What is the warranty?
Warranty, so we buy extended warranties on our buses for 10 years. So we get a lot out of that. It's very helpful. Not everything on the bus is warranted for 10 years,
So
but the
up to
major.
10 years, like the total age of the bus.
I'm sorry?
Is it up to 10 years or is it adding on?
No.
It's up to 10 years.
10 years from the first day we put it in service.
Okay.
Next slide. Okay, so for this budget cycle, we are recommending a replacement of 23 buses for a cost of $3,674,102. And I'm sure this is probably a sticker shock because we've been somewhere in the neighborhood about 2.5, maybe 2.4 million prior to the purchase of the electric buses. And the reason for the cost of buses going up is really twofold. There's a lot of increase on steel, rubber, plastics, you name it. That's one. Two, back in December 2022, new state OGS contract was let out, where it used to be that bus prices would increase once a year on the producer price index, PPI. Now it's every quarter. And where it used to be once a year at max 5%, and typically it's around 2.5 to 3, now it could be up to 7% every quarter, between 5 to 7% every quarter. And so the prices of the buses have really gone up tremendously. There's another issue that we will face in either 2026, 2027, and that's going to be another increase on the internal combustion engine EPA mandate. Probably it's going to add another, I don't know, 20, 25,000 to the price of an individual bus.
So you're seeing 5 to 7% increases every quarter?
Every quarter, potentially, yeah. I'm not saying that it will, but potentially.
They can, the allowance is for them to adjust.
Now, of course, we
the prices.
buy once a year, so wherever that price is,
That's
that
where you're buying them at.
And you're seeing those types of increases, 5 to 7% a quarter?
oh yeah, they're up. That's why we're paying so much now.
I mean,
that we're proposing.
yeah, I mean, our big buses, when six, you know, I remember when they got 125, we thought it was ridiculous.
Right, right.
Per bus, and I was like, okay,
Now they're at 170,
we wish we had
190.
125,
Yeah.
and so just to give to give a perspective on this, right? So that's the reason I asked Alan Nisha about the replacement year. So just let's play this fast forward in the hypothetical in our head, and we keep those 13 66 passengers for 10 years. So that's 2034. And just assuming that the price point, Rich, right now is around 500,000 for electric bus stays the same. Could come down, could go up, who knows? So those 13 is about 2.2 million for the 13. To replace those 13 in 10 years is triple the cost, 6.5, 6.6 million. So I give perspective, because that's the thing when we think about replacement cycle, we have to think about that in the sense of what does that actually mean. And so you'll see later on, we're talking about some other things that we just can't bank on having buses, keeping buses, what type of buses. We have to think about some other things that we have to look at differently to look at the efficiency of transportation, period, because quite frankly, it's not cost prohibitive. We'll be spending $20 million a year trying to replace buses in this market space, which is not, it's not affordable.
What's our overall budget usually?
So for
Russian, overall budget is that?
Yeah, so for buses.
Nope.
So yeah, we will be spending easily 20,
Right, so it's
20,
not
15.
salaries
what's
and
that?
what we're
No,
looking at
no,
30% anymore, it's buses.
Exactly. And so that'd be easily 15, 20% of the,
Yeah.
So Al, just to clarify, you're also seeing those types of increases with the e-buses too?
Oh, indeed. Yeah. I think the price of the e-buses, my own personal opinion, is because there's so much money the federal and state government's throwing out there. Prices,
Oh, that's
if
what's
they
driving
left the
those up.
market, let it deal with it, I don't think you'd be seeing those kinds of prices of, $500,000. They keep saying it's gonna come down, but yet, when we're out of the public ear, you hear just the opposite. No, they're not coming down. So, and these are experts in the field, not me. These are people who sell buses, there are people who work on buses, that they don't see the pricing coming down. And that's what we're facing now.
So this is our parallel world. We live in parallel universe. We still need to have, how many buses, Belinda? 180 plus buses every morning goes out. Easily that, and then spares. And now we have to, at the same time, figure out how do we maneuver infrastructure preparation, and then a cycle of trying to integrate e-buses over time, because we can't do this proposal for e-buses all at once without a significant cost structure. So again, these are the things that, again, these are challenges that we have to deal with on the bus side of it. And I think the other side of it, we're going to talk about some other things that we spoke about to the board already in terms of using some year-end funds to update our routing software to try to get a better handle on routes and those kind of things to be a little bit more efficient.
So, why no e-buses, the replacement cycle? Here's my comments. The Achilles heels of electrifying the school bus fleet is the availability of electric power, which we've talked about. We can't move forward in the fleet conversion until we can bring in the huge amount of power that's going to be needed. This would eventually require the building of an electrical substation on the campus. So our approach, as we've been discussing, is going to be a two-phase approach. Short term, we need enough electrical power to power about 84 buses. And hopefully, as we get with National Grid, that's what we're talking about. Maybe they can give us 4 megawatts without going, full blast on a substation right now. During the winter, summertime, that would be throttled back to about 1.4 megs, because we won't need as much power in the summer as we would do in the winter time. So, again, short term, 84 buses. In long term, would be to power the rest of the fleet, which is going to probably require around 6 megawatts of power. But in that conversation, we can't lose sight of the rest of the buildings on campus, and especially as the old boilers have to be replaced with electrical heating systems, what have you. We in discussion, we think we're going to require about 13 megs, and that's going to require a substation. 6 megs and up, we will need a substation on campus. So that's it. Next slide, please. So on this slide here, what we're working on next is really what we want to do is enhance the customer service, the efficiency of the department, of course, safety. We're working on upgrading our routing software, which will lead to better customer service via parent app, which we've had parents ask for that. That will help track their child or children's bus. Another example is that we're going to be retiring 5 more buses than we're actually asking to be replaced, because we just don't see the need to maintain them relative to student enrollment numbers. And we continue to move methodically as it relates to the electric bus initiative.
I'm sorry, did you say you're retiring 5 buses early?
5 more, right?
5 more than less than we're going to replace.
So we're going to lower the fleet by 5 more buses.
Is that because of the software or just enrollment?
Enrollment. We're basing
Okay.
that decision on enrollment right now.
Okay.
But enrollment patterns, not necessarily enrollment.
Right.
Where kids live
Patterns,
and where
right.
buses have to go and routes and those kind of things.
Okay.
And I give all the credit, it's Belinda's Belinda's taking finding all the efficiency that Alan's leaving behind.
She's a huge part of that decision. All right, next, yeah. So again, we're asking for 23 buses, various sizes, at those cost bases for $3.7 million.
I'm gonna ask a question. Sure. I'm gonna ask a question. What happens, Nobody, this is not, I'm just asking a question. Somebody will be like, oh, Deanna's against electric, that's not it. What happens when, if the state goes in a U-turn, we've done all this, and now we're not doing it? So then what happens to all this infrastructure and the buses and whatnot?
Well, the good thing is, I mean, anything, we'll use it, so it's not gonna go to waste.
Right.
We'll use it, we just have to then figure out how does that fit into the scheme of replacement moving forward. So here's a perfect example of this. I was at Mahonison then, so we're talking about maybe 90, I think Barbie here, when we went CNG, Certified Natural Gas. And Shen put a whole bunch of infrastructure here for that. And because the reason I know, because we purchased some of those buses at Mohan, and we used to come to Shen to fuel them up, because it was the closest fueling, in fact, it was like really the only fueling spot. By the time we got to Mahonison, we could only go over certain routes because of, and so there's a lot of infrastructure because there was a lot of funds, because people thought that's where the direction was going. It didn't, wasn't supported, fell apart, and yes, and so we got the benefit of that, so we retrofitted a lot of those tanks and things of that nature to use what we do now. So we're not gonna scrap them and throw it out, we're gonna figure out how we retrofit and move forward. So the thing about electric buses now, it's a huge industry, right? So you have more electric cars, or I should say, he probably has many electric cars on them. So we know the industry's not going to go away. The question is what's going to be, how compelling the argument is that you must do certain thing by a certain time. And so I think that's what most people who are debating the argument, it's not for or against, it's how can we effectively do it? How can we manage this process over time? And so what we're talking about now, and that's why I made the point about 2034 replacement, we're talking about just initial purchases. We're not talking about getting into a replacement cycle where the lifespan of e-buses are similar. I think it was 8 years with the battery or something.
Yeah, so the battery is warranted for 8 years, but that's really a sliding scale based on the number of times you charge it. So it's not a solid 8 years. If you charge it once a day, you probably get 8 years out of it. If that bus is on a route where you have to charge it a couple, 3 times a day, it's less than 8 years. And the battery, as you all know, is the most expensive piece. Our colleagues to the south of us had one replaced under warranty for $70,000 for one battery pack. So that's what we're facing. You know, where you save on fuel, you're going to put out somewhere else.
Could I clarify something you said earlier, because I just want to make sure, it sounded in a way that I don't think it was intended, so I just want to, when you said that we're retiring 5 buses early, it isn't that we could hang on to those 5, that we could reduce this by 5 buses for some future year, the proposal that you're putting out right now.
We're going to reduce the current fleet by 5 buses.
And not replace them.
So
And not
instead of
replace
like increasing 23 to 28, it's 23 because you don't have to replace 5. That's where I was trying to just clarify.
We will be replacing 23 buses.
Instead of 28, because
Instead
you
of
don't,
28.
got it.
Yeah.
Yes. That's what
Yes.
okay, perfect.
Yeah, and you know, again, to Deanna's question, you know, no one is against electric anything. If it makes sense, do it. I just think the timing is against us. It's not going to work. The cost is too cost prohibitive, and you know, if we do soak money into this, it doesn't mean that we can't turn 20%, 30% of the fleet. It does make sense, you know, for some routes to be to have electric vehicles. But you know, I don't want to get into a lot of operational challenges ahead if we go full blast with this at 100% turnover of the fleet at 130.
Yeah.
I just want to make one quick point. Actually, 2 quick points. Sorry. Number 1, electric buses are extremely heavy. They're extremely heavy, so they're going to be a huge burden on our asphalt system. Yeah, I mean the county's asphalt system, really. And I love electric buses. I love the concept. I really do. But it's something that we have to think about. Asphalt's very expensive these days. Like just repaving is very expensive. The second thing, you said we need an additional 4 megawatts of power.
So we need just for the
Six.
buses,
Just
6
for-
megs, just for the buses.
Sorry,
For
my
buses
language.
or for
No,
84?
for the fleet.
For the fleet.
For the
So the new Half Moon solar project puts out 6 megawatts. So our bus fleet would be using all of the energy that the new solar fleet, like the new solar,
Yeah.
plant.
So think of it like this,
not
every
using.
megawatt, I believe, is like 1,000 homes, 1,400 homes. We're talking massive.
It's a massive amount of energy.
Yep, that's helpful.
So no, Al, thank you, and Belinda, thank you. A lot of work behind the scenes, and I think it's important for, certainly for the board. I think the board knows and appreciate that. I think for the public to know and appreciate that, because we will have people come and write comments about, the district ignoring mandates, not buying. It's going to happen, right? So I'm going to tell you it's going to happen. And while that's the case, I mean, the viewpoint differentials are there, and we're not focused on viewpoints. We're focused on practically what we need to do to ensure that the 10,000, I think right now about 11,000 kids that we transport internal, within district as well as out of district, that we're able to do that effectively. Even with the driver shortage, just another conversation point that we're not having. And also we need to do it in a way that, quite frank with you, that we're not straddling a huge financial burden on the taxpayers and or compromising budget-wise and otherwise, right? So that's that delicate balance we have. And so for the first time, we do have this real fiscal challenge, if you want to say, that we have to figure out how do we do this and do this in a very careful way, or one of my favorite terms, a very measured way, so we're not getting ahead of ourselves. And so taking advantage of be it federal or state resources when we can. The last one, we were the last people on the eligibility criteria that should have gotten it, and that's made a point, because the people who were eligible under the criteria didn't apply because, frankly, they don't have the infrastructure, they don't have some of the things, and so now that's why we're putting ourselves in the line, because we know that those who meet the criteria are not going to jump in the line, and so all of a sudden we're trying to say, okay, which is unfortunate, because then we still haven't solved the longer term issues we have in terms of how resources are allocated as well. So that's a whole different conversation point. So a lot of work taking place, and I punctuate this piece. I was fortunate to be at the garage the day that the bus vendor brought down one of the buses to try out the chargers to make sure that worked. There was a lot of hiccups with it. It's nothing against the bus vendors, and a lot of lessons learned for them too, because what they thought wasn't. And so quickly we thought, boy, if this is 2 chargers taking almost 3 hours or longer, how is there a good hour? Think about if this was 200 buses going through this rigmarole. So there's a lot of bugs to be worked out. And the point of this, the mechanic crew at Trans, he has a solid crew of mechanics, and they were all into it. They're all into it, in which I was actually impressed, thinking like, wow, these guys were really, really into it, and largely because a lot of our buses have gone to plug in, try to diagnostic anyway, right? When you think about, it's not a typical mechanic that you would think of. And so I say kudos to them, because that's also going to be another big growing pains. And the second to that, the one that once we get our buses in, is driving electric buses and the dynamics of some of those kind of things become interesting. So we're working through the details, and for those who, for you as board members, when you hear people say, why are we not doing this? I hope that you have an appreciation that it's not a why not versus why. These are the realities that we have to deal with, and until certain other factors change, we cannot deal with some of those other realities. And we're working through some of those things as we move forward. So we probably will very much have conversation about October, November referendum off cycle. Reason why we're off cycle, because we need time. We need to build in as much time to do some of these things as possible. So more to come on some of those things as we plan forward.
Okay,
Thank you. So the next piece I want to walk through, Kathy's unfortunately out sick. So I won't necessarily go through all the details, and some of it is, a lot of it is informational for the board. So last week we went through the budget piece. I just kind of put some summary slide at the beginning in terms of this is where we landed at this point. We have done some tweaking here and there, but it hasn't changed the bottom line in terms of where the budget is as we move forward. I say at this point, and on Friday Bulletin, I'm going to give some more details. But yesterday, the 2 houses, Senate and the Assembly, came out with their 1 House bills. And the good thing is the news was very favorable, which people anticipated that both houses were going to have a better outlook on the budget proposal than the governor's proposal. And one of the pieces that we were watching closely, Shen, is so a lot of, and I mentioned it Friday, but there's been a lot of hoopla about the safe, harmless, and removal of that in certain school districts seeing, right now forecast to see negative reduction in state aid. For us, what was hidden in that language was an artificial cap on the foundation aid formula, not allowing it to run. And that artificial cap pretty much had capped us, Shen, at about 2%. If the formula runs, we're a little bit more like 3.5%, 4%, which when you think of the larger schema, that 1% is a size of a chunk of change, so to speak. And so one of the things that I was pleased to see, and again, I'm gonna send some notes in the Friday bulletin, is both houses are advocating to allow the foundation aid formula to run and not necessarily do some of the artificial caps, which address the same, because you can't address safe harmless without allowing the formula to run. So it's one of those two things, they're kind of attached to, associated with each other. So that's good news. If that happens, good news for us. So we probably see a slight bump up in state aid, which again, it's good news for us as we move forward with the budget pieces. So again, we'll see how that plays out for us in the future. And I think it'll bear well for us to try to do some things, again, as we look at year end, which we're gonna talk about reserves, how we use reserves, and use reserve to bridge the gap forward. Reserves have been the piece that, as a school district, that kept us fiscally strong even through the most significant downturns, where a lot of places were cutting staff, we were adding staff, because we were very keen about how we maximize and utilize reserves moving forward. So again, just want to recap that. This is kind of like where we are right now. Just for the board's purposes, thank you, Neil, for pointing this out. One of the spreadsheets that, when you download from Excel to PDF, the rows and columns get squashed and they look all funky. So these two links actually have essentially the same information. One of them has just the year by year, one has the show how we went from one year to the next, which is, so I'm not going to go through it, but just point out to the board because it's one of the information point that last time around people want to have that information, people who can't sleep and want to stay up at night and read all the budget codes. You have two of them now. So don't look at both of them because you're looking at the same data points.
Although, thank you for doing that, I appreciate it.
So again, I'm just going to skip through the tax cap piece. I want to emphasize that again. Right now, we're pretty much right at the tax cap, and if we see revenue differentials after the budget is passed, so the time that the budget becomes important, that they may create some either additional opportunities and or a further gap between allowance and taxes. So when I say the further gap, meaning the tax implication will be lessened, we lower for taxpayers and or create some opportunities for us to do some other things within the budget as well.
I'm sorry, I'm confused. Are you talking about if it's capped at 2%?
No, if the state let the formula run and we see more
we
state
have
aid.
more
Correct.
flexibility. Okay.
Two things, it
And that's gonna
allows,
be for the 24, 25?
yeah, exactly.
Oh, wow. When are we gonna know that?
April 1
After
is supposed to have a budget, so you'll see.
We're supposed to.
Yeah, this next coming week, a lot of stuff will come to end. Once the two-house budget hits, that's when all the conversations start to become very real, because now you have three budgets on the table, the proverbial three individuals in the room kind of conversation. So now a lot of those things start coming ahead. And Nisbet did a pretty good analysis too. If you get the Nisbet, they sent out something today there was pretty good analysis of that of the one-house budgets.
So in that scenario, so this is a conservative estimate. This is the worst case.
So
scenario.
this right now is our worst case scenario, which is actually pretty good.
Good. Okay.
And I say that's pretty good because when we look at worst case scenario, we'll just kind of skip through these. We spoke about these last time. We look at worst case scenario, and again, even the tax rates are worst case in the sense that we're using current year's assessed valuation, and the assessed valuation, what I mean by the value of all the properties within the school district, and that has been uptick. So the higher that value goes, the more the cost is socialized across people, so the individual person pays slightly less, right? The higher the value of those things go. And it's a lot is driven by commercial property, not necessarily by residential. Commercial is truly the big driver of the assessed valuation. So again, we'll be in a good place, and it's great to be sitting here saying that we're in a good place going into the budget process this early in the game. And again, it's not by accident, it's by the things we've been doing over the years. So I walked through these last time. So a couple of things, just wanted kind of the backdrop to it. Again, this is more informational because these data points are going to change, right? These forecasts. So one of the things that we always, when we look at the budget, we always think about, then what does this look like fund balance, right? A year out. So we're talking about next July, right? July of next June, end of June, July 1 of 2025. And so some of that, we look at the prior year's balances, the projected expenditures that we think we're gonna have at the end of this year, projected expenditure we think we're gonna have at the end of next year, projected revenues. So there's a lot of projection, a lot of what if in this, but it kind of gives the board a glance. And a big piece I want to keep in mind is that the state allowance is 4%. So we can carry over 4% fund balance. And so this is a little bit hard to see, but I do have it's for the board purposes, so you can certainly do this at home. And so when we look at the fund balance piece of it, I'm just gonna go down to the bottom line. If we were to essentially, as Kathy kind of put here, we're talking about a worst case scenario. If we were essentially to spend 99.9% of our budget this year, so we do worst case scenario. So we do this, we look at the worst case scenario. If circumstances call that we're gonna spend almost every penny we have this year, which means we have very little to carry over and add to what we had before. But again, it's a percentage piece. If we were to do that, we still and assuming the revenues that we'll get, and as you notice right here, we're seeing a higher amount of revenues because we anticipate the revenues might be slightly higher this year because of some pilot payment, because of the interest payment, because of some of the other things that we didn't put into the revenue stream earlier in the year. So with that being said, we anticipate that we will still have a fund balance that's really right around 4%. And that's making the assumption that we would contribute to some of the things that we have traditionally contributed to. The TRS reserve is one that we contribute. TRS has a reserve because whenever those rates go up, we don't want to have to make budget cuts to pay for pension costs, period. Same thing with tax surcharge. When we have tax claims, when we have big claims hit, we don't want to come back to the board and say, well, in order to pay this big claim, we have to go and bond. You hear a lot of places bonding to pay tax surcharge. We don't want to be in that situation ever. It's kind of like, going home saying, I got to go and pay my mortgage and buy groceries with my credit card. It can't. That's not the way to function as a system. So that's what. So I use that example because that's what reserves for. Like, what's your bank account? What do you have in the bank to deal with those expenditures, right? And so that's even with us making some contribution to those. And we'll talk about the reserve pieces as we move forward.
For TRS, you're planning to increase it to 1.1?
Yeah, so no, we're going to add to that.
Oh, so it's going to be 1.8.
That's yeah. So we'll see when we get to the reserve. You'll see the amount in the TRS. So again, we're just making an assumption of the ones that we've contributed to regularly in the past. TRS, workers' comps. Those are the ones that every year we're spending down faster. Almost automatically, those ones spending down. So the point of this exercise is to kind of show the board that when we look at a worst case scenario, we're still looking at a fund balance, even a year out potentially, at about 3.5%. So in other words, we're not building a budget that's building a structural deficit in it. You can't. And I say that because you have places that build budget with a structural deficit. They eat up all the fund balance in 1 year to get down to a certain tax levy, tax rate, and then next year they're suffering because they don't have the backfill capacity to come into it. So that's why I use the notion of living on debt versus living on savings, right? As we move forward. So so we run this fund balance exercise to say, on a worst case scenario, what does it look like a year out?
So with the I'm sorry.
No,
go ahead. I can explain it.
I was gonna ask, so if we end up above the 4%, we could use that excess to pay down.
Or contribute to other reserves. Yes,
right.
Correct.
So we do that in advance and then not dinged by the government.
Yeah, and so one of the things then, great question, Patrick. So when Kathy did her mid-year goals, good mid-year financial update to the board, we spoke about a couple of things. Al mentioned Rudin software. Potential of doing that's $300,000-400,000. So that's not something we just casually budget for. It's something that opportunity presents itself. We see a great opportunity to do it, and then it lends efficiency, right? So it pays for itself. And I'm going to give you another example of that. Several years back, probably 8 years out, when we invested in GPS for buses. At the same time, when we were cutting in other areas, we were investing here, and people thought we were nuts. But we know that in the year out, it was going to pay for itself twice over in terms of efficiency and routes. So we'll save money. So those kind of things, right? So how do we do those things with those opportunities, like what you're saying, Patrick? The same way when we leverage some of the federal resources to do some of those kind of things that we one-time exposure, but multi-year benefits, right? And so we're always trying to figure out those kind of things. You spend $1, hopefully over time we get $2 back and $2.50 back in return. So when we get to the end of the year, again, that's why I say it's a projection. We assess all those kind of, where are we? What are some things that at the end of the year we can look to either pay off, purchase, pay down debt service, so we don't have that continued debt going, because if we're gonna go out with a referendum in October, November, we gotta balance that debt implication, right? So we're always trying to look at those kind of things so that we balance the implication on taxpayers. Because at the end of the day, we want the tax impact. We want to do great things and have a flatline tax impact, which we have done. We have done it for almost 2 decades, and the plan is to be able to have a system that continues to do so if we kind of stay with the processes that we have used in the past. Sorry, Neil.
And we're well below 4%, right now, that we're still tracking that, right?
Yeah. So the 4% is not an issue for us, to be honest with you.
But so going back to the 882, is that something that we're gonna realize this year, or is it next year? For the
NYSERDA.
buses, the charge?
Oh, the NYSERDA one, we don't even get, it doesn't even come to us. They go right to the vendor.
Because,
Yeah, how this goes, we don't even feel money.
right, but.
Yeah, it's this
but-
year
but
buses
that's
are we
something we have
purchasing.
to lay out, so it does change our
Yeah,
calculation.
it'll change ultimately what we're gonna end up paying, which, once we get those buses in May, and we get the bill, so to speak, it'll be 880, whatever less.
Less.
And then we have to decide, do we bond for those buses, or do we pay off those buses current year
With our
and
unappropriated.
avoid the bonding, exactly. And which will that impact fund balance, impact capacity, contribute reserves, and that's where we make those decisions without having an adverse impact on any of those things.
Okay, so would that be like the 1.5? No,
Yeah,
no,
so-
actually, that could be
It
that.
could be that, yeah, so
Yeah,
again, these
okay.
are estimates, exactly, so those
Okay.
are decision points that we'll bring to the board to make those decisions.
Got it.
So again, it's a matter of, what's the greatest return on investment, right? Avoiding borrowing money, and quite frankly, just some years, because so not to prolong this too much, because of the things that we do, we have a very strong bond rating for people out there listening, your credit score, right? So I think 900 is the max. 900 is the max, we're in the 850 range because of the things that we do. So we could borrow money cheaper than places who have a 400 credit score, right? So that's what I say, all these things are great for us as a system because it gives us great opportunity access. And so we have to balance that, thinking, okay, what's the better sequence of things? Using this to pay off certain things. We also started to watch again, for the first time in several years, the investment market. Because last 2 years we've seen, okay, and now, we're still watching to see what the Fed's gonna do, because a lot of what we could invest in, safe investments, ties around the Fed's fees. So if the Feds go up and down, that impacts what we get for return. But right now, you put your money in the bank, you get a decent return back, versus 3 years ago, that wasn't the case at all. You put it on the mattress, you'd probably get more money. That's the case. So I say that, but those are the kind of factors that we think about. So this is show the board that in a worst case scenario, a year out with what we propose a budget, we'll be okay.
Okay.
I mean, does that make sense?
It does, thanks.
So let me go back here for a second. So that's the fund balance one. This is, again, this right now, that's why I shared the final budget. It's more information at this point, so you have awareness of some of the things, how things play out. The next one that we talk about is the reserves, and again, reserves, and let me I'll come back to that in a second. So when we think about reserves, right? So the state, we can only do certain reserves. So it's not like we just make stuff up, right? It's like we just don't make up a reserve because we think it's a cute idea. Workers' comp is one that we always we watch closely because it goes up and down, and it's one of those you can't predict who's going to get hurt, when severity of. So we always have to have, and so and all these reserves are either by some accounting average. So accounting rule in on this, is this a reasonable amount to reserve based upon your past utilization trends and things. And so we're not just like arbitrarily making the numbers up, or like tax surcharges based upon how many tax surcharge claims we currently know of, and the likelihood of those claims coming to a head at some point, right? So again, we have to have worst case scenario in some of these scenarios as we move forward. So workers' comp is one that we watch pretty closely. So this is the current balance as of this is current balance right now. Well, when I say current balance, because we could have made some transaction between last time we printed this out, but this is where we started with end of last year, 6/30/23. Just kind of give you some sense of that piece of it. Tax surcharge one is a big one for us. The good thing is I want to say survive is probably the wrong word. we have gone through the largest of the challenges, which were a lot of the hotels within the region. During COVID, a lot of those places just got hammered. So there's a lot of tax tertiary cases with those pieces. So this is going to give you some sense. Again, we're just looking at balances, right? So when we look at contribution to those kind of things, we see what claims we have, what's our current claim. So March is a big time. Coming March, we start getting a lot of claims. This is a claim season. March, April, so we look at that and see how that will impact the number and what does the year-end balance look like as we move forward. The retirement contribution one is the one, again, we try to keep up with that one. That's the TRS one where we try to monitor the rates. And again, TRS rates have been, last 2 years have been relatively flat. However, TRS is based upon the market. And so that market downturn, 3 years ago, is going to eventually catch up with rates probably 2 years out. And so those kind of ones that we kind of make sure that we have covered. This one is always a hard one to explain to people. This employment benefit word by your accountant person. What's the standard? Not GASB. It might be one of GASB 40 something. One of those funky accounting numbers.
Oh, was it 80 something?
One of those that
where they made the change and now we're having to recognize.
So we have to recognize a lot. But basically saying that if we look at all the potential benefits that if everyone in the organization were to leave right now, what do we have to pay out for vacation, for sick, for anything that anyone would be entitled to pay out for? For us, we can never ever reserve, nor will we ever reserve that much money. We're talking about tens of millions of dollars, right? And so that's the whole notion that we're going to go out of business and wholesale, fire sale, sell everything to pay everybody off. I mean, so that's what essentially what the law transferred to. So each year we try to make a good faith effort to contribute to that. But that's a large number. So there's a liability on the other side of the ledger because no one is going to fully fund that piece of it.
I thought that one just had to do with how it was recognized in our
No, so
financials.
there's a due diligence. So I get you some more.
So we have to adjust our reserve based on that too?
And we don't, relative to what our potential exposure is small. So we do contribute to it over time, but it's small. The good thing about that one is it's not, you don't have the restrictions in terms of how you spend it moving forward. So the reason why I'm saying that, because the next one is a perfect example of that. Capital project reserve, voters have to approve the reserve, approve the amount, the number of years to take the amount, they have to approve the spending. That's what I mean by the restriction. So that's the only one that comes with absolutely, have to have voter authority to set up, time, the amount, the time, and how we spend it. And so right now, we're after this year and the current projects that we have, we're probably going to use up all the reserves on 5 Maxwell. So when we do another referendum, we will be proposing to set up another capital reserve. And I think this last one we did of $12 million over 20 years. And at that point, quite frankly, it seemed ambitious. But looking back at it, it was nothing. Because quite frankly, we kind of, so it might be the opposite. It might be $20 million over 10 years. But we'll align that with the building condition survey and how much we try to use that to cushion the tax impact between state aid and local responsibility. Does that make sense?
It does, but this is, we're not actually going to propose this for this referendum or for this vote.
No. When we do a capital project at some point in the future. No. Correct. Again, just right now, just information so the board is aware of some of those kind of things. And then the last one is that sub-reserve one that we have for, so the last one was TRS. We also have a sub-reserve for ERS, Employee Retirement System. So again, those are in a larger scheme of the budget, they're not singularly large costs, but they're singularly large increases. When you think about our operation budget go about $8 million, and if we have pension costs go by $3 million, it's either we're going to make a choice of not doing something or having a reserve to offset that, right?
Yeah, this is the one I was questioning. Is it going to be it's going to be another 750,000?
No, so this one, that was live adjustment. The Kathy was here. So when auditors came, they made an adjustment to that. So this is what the current balance is right now.
Okay.
Right? So they adjusted that by that 1.1.
Okay, so it won't be that plus the 750.
Correct. No.
Okay, so the other number.
So the 750 was for, the 750 was projected if we were doing anything with the TRS one, and then this is for the ERS one. Two different.
Oh, so on the other side, I saw them both together, but it's because that's the everything together.
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay, got it.
So again, the reason, go ahead, Patrick.
So, most of those didn't change, right? So the balance of 23 was the same as the balance of 24. But I'm
Projected right
assuming-
now.
But that's the thing, is they're not under your bed, right? These are all getting, interest, I'm assuming.
And some of them we're gonna spend out of, we're gonna expend, like tax surcharge reserve. Spring, we spent a lot of money on tax surcharge reserve.
Right,
So this, it's not a live accounting of it, but we will
Right.
spend down some of these quite a bit.
yeah, so these are just placeholders functioning.
Correct.
Okay.
Just so the board have a sense of, we have healthy reserves, and as we look at the year end, we make contributions as necessary and or use unappropriated fund balance that's beyond a 4% to do other things, pay down debt, some of the things that we spoke about, because we have to, I mean, again, this particular debt is important for us because you're gonna see it next, which I'm glad you brought up. Let me just transition to that, Petra. So you'll see the piece that we are watching closely is, so bus purchase debt, for example. And so we have, my apologies, you probably can't even see this to save your life. I can't see it, I'm looking close at it. The piece that I want to point out is when you look out here on the spreadsheet on this side, so it's kind of hard. You see the debt, so you see the years over here. So this is not assuming anything Al just proposed, by the way. This existing bus debt, and this is not, so we haven't put a schedule out there to say what does an e-bus debt schedule look like. At some point we'll do that. But just so these are current exposures that we have. And so if you see the total right here, this column, you see how the debt is decreasing, right? And so that's important for us because when we do things like this, where does that debt kick into the equation? And so this is only one component of our debt schedule, right? Of our debt liability. So then we have to look at that and say, okay, when we do this referendum, how much debt that means? Then we have to add that to, okay, what does that mean from the standpoint of our capital project debt? And so the one I want to point out from this, as you see again, these are the years. So right here, the lavender line is where we are right now. And you'll see that as projects come, these are all the different projects we have. So certain projects are maturing. So the $38 million project when we built Shattercon, that project is going to mature in 2 years. So that's falling off the table. The projects that we did, expansion of the high school library, signage, playground, all that project, that's 16 that project's going to fall off the table in 2034. So this is a tech room project. So again, so when we look at those kind of, then now this is the current project we just finished up at Guana, all those pieces, that this is this project. And so 5 Maxwell will kick in this sequence of things here. So we look at the debt and then start thinking about, okay, if we're going to add new debt to the equation, what does that mean, right? When certain debts are retiring and we add new debt, so we're going to see, and let me go to this next one, just follow the bouncy ball for a quick second, because this combines both of them.
Okay, but it doesn't include the $3 million proposal that was.
No, nothing current, because this is not real. This we're only talking about what we have current real liability
Okay.
right now. So when you look at the combined piece right here, so this I broke them out separate because we have facilities debt and then we have bus debt, right? And so as you notice that the bus debt was going down, and then we start saying, okay, I think Kathy, this is the new referendum. The last one is going to kick in down here. That's when the one that we just passed with e-buses, it's going to kick in at this point. But when we look at the debt, right, so just kind of think about it, in 2018, our debt service mortgage payment was about $10.7 million. It started going down. This year when we added, we knew this split was going to happen. With Shattercon, with 5 Maxwell coming on board, we knew we were going to have the blip up. And then you see the debt start going on again. And so as we start talking about future capital projects, and again, remember, we're talking about 15, 20 years out, depends on how we borrow. So we start talking about future capital projects, here's where the sweet spots start coming for us again. So when we add a new project on, we're still within a reasonable debt threshold. So this is the blip right here that we're going to contend with as a part of our debt. And this is where we're having conversation about what can we pay off to avoid borrowing long-term debt for some of those kind of things, right? So to minimize that blip. And so that blip falls back into the $11 million category versus in that $14 million category. Because as you start seeing a kind of standard piece. Because when we do projects, if we do a project 25, I always do project by the year. Referendum 25, 26, that kicks in 28, 29, and so we fall right into that where we start. So debts start materializing because remember the other schedules, certain other debts start falling off the table. So we try to time it. It's not exact science. You have years overlap. It's 2 years overlap, we can contend with. 10 years overlap, that's a problem. That's not overlap. That's a parallel function, right? So the debt piece is a big piece for us, and that's why we really try to manage the debt in terms of when we borrow bands versus bonds, right? Are we band anticipation notes? So we try to go to that thing with short-term borrowing, and then how much of that we're going to turn into long-term borrowing, right? So that's why the payoff at the end of the year for certain things, paying off $2 or $3 million make a big difference over the life of how much principal interest is charged on anything, right? I call this credit card principal. Sometimes it's better to sacrifice and use that last $1,000 in your hand than not use it because the credit card bill is going up nowadays by 34% interest or whatever that ridiculous market is pointing out. So we try to avoid those kind of things. So again, I want to show this to the board because we're going to have conversations around capital project, and when we do that, I don't know if Naomi, maybe Gus and Darren. I remember that colorful chart I have in the debt. I have an old colorful chart that went to 2035 to show when new projects come on board. So we're going to update that chart to say if a new referendum come on board, what's the debt load from a budget perspective as we move forward. So we can see how it'll go up slightly and then it start to flatten back out. Does that make some sense? So again, information for the board, a lot of information right now. I'm sharing it with you because all these things are going to come back up in different conversations. As we sort, this is going to come up when we get to the end of the year. When we say, let's pay off some debt, you're going to say, okay, well, what does that mean? Well, we're going to pull this chart back out and show that if we pay off this, what's the implication for buses? It's more likely it's going to be bus debt that we're going to pay off some of the bus debt. When we come to the end of the year, we talk about we're going to contribute to reserves. What does that mean? You're going to see these are the reserves that we're going to contribute to. So again, part of it is a budget process that has nothing to do per se directly with the budget we're proposing, but the budget we're proposing will in fact impact the capacity that we have to do some of these things at the end of the year. Does that make some sense? And that was like a fun explanation. If Kathy was here, it'd be even more interesting. So those are pretty much the last pieces that we have to our puzzle. The budget vote is coming up. Before I forget, we're going to look at Gowanna, the side entrance again. Yes, the side entrance of the vote to the gym. Yeah, it's because we're still trying to separate kid traffic from even though with the new lobby, we still, and I say that because sometimes people, you got a new lobby now, well, you still have the same problem with kids. So we're still going to look at that same entrance. The absentee ballots, going to be gearing up for those, military ballots, disabled citizens, all those kind of things. We're gearing up for those process now. Clearly, everyone knows the petitions are out there for board members, and so Vanessa has some blank petitions. And in short order, when people start submitting petitions, we have some sense of who's going to run and not run. Right now, I mean, you could download the document, and we don't even know that you download the document, or you could pick one up and make 50,000 copies of it and give it to 50,000 people. Who knows? Hope not. So we don't know. It's not real until it's real. Until people send it, we certify the names, addresses, and all those kind of things. Make sure that people who sign it are legitimate residents of the district, and also we certify that the people who are running had to be resident eligible last year, and that's what I think sometimes trip people up, is that piece of it. And so we do everything from going to Board of Elections and making sure that people are certified to vote one place, another place, those kind of things. So we go through that process and come back to the board with what we see were hopefully names of candidates as we move forward. In fact, I thought I had on here, one of the upcoming board meetings, April, is when we recognize potential candidates, but I don't remember the date offhand. After the petitions, let me say.
Probably on the 24th.
Yeah, I have to look at that. So the next step for us is, see what happened with the state budget. If any good news, or more good news come, how does that translate to, ability to make adjustments in the budget? Either expand the capacity and or, reduce the potential impact for taxpayers, because we have to have due diligence on both sides of the equation. This community is very supportive of the things that we put out there, and I mean, when 80% of the people saying yes to our budget, we can't take that for granted, because we went through years here at Shen, where budgets went down year after year after year after year. In fact, the reason why the contingency law in New York State is the contingency law, because Shen went out 3 times with the same budget, and the state changed the law, saying, "Thou shalt not do that. You need to make some adjustments to show due diligence." So I say that because I don't take anything for granted. I appreciate what people support, what we do as a system, and we want to be fair to say to folks that if we need more, we're not asking more just to waste. We're asking more because legitimately we need more to do some things, and the return will be worthwhile, be it experience kids are having, or return in terms of how we take care of the infrastructure, whatever else we need to invest in. So to me, that's the budget process, right? It's not a number, it's a process that lends to those things. So we'll see what news we have. If any news different, we may not have any news different. We might be having a very similar conversation, but we'll see what the next week news.
Quick question. Budget roadshow dates.
We're getting those now. We're waiting for some people to finalize. We're working on those now. So hopefully we get those soon. And once we get them, send them in by the bulletin so our board members know we have. So PTA meetings, for people not familiar, PTA meetings, faculty meetings, senior citizen center meetings, town board meetings, what am I missing? Rotary meetings. I think those are some of the main ones that we go to. So yeah, so once we get those, we'll send those out.
Okay, thank you. Lots gone into these presentations. Thank you, Mr. Carroll.
Yeah, I just want to check that one date if you don't mind.
Oh, you mean for when we announce?
Yeah,
Or when the names are
when we
drawn?
recognize candidates. So nominating petitions are due on April 20, the 22nd, which is a Monday. It's land on the weekend, but you go to Monday after, so that Monday. So Monday at 5 o'clock, we'll know who are the people, and the order that, and for the purpose of the board and the public, I'm not there when they draw the names. In fact, we typically, the custodian that's on duty that night, meet with Kara, and that person draws a name, and he doesn't know who the difference between, A and B, and that's how the names are sequenced on the ballot. So sometimes people think, who's doing that? I delivered it. That's one of the few times I leave the office early. See, because I don't want to be accused of being there when it occurred.
Okay.
So that's where we are. Just wanted, if you don't mind, I want to point out, so this is a sequence. So to the next, the March 19th meeting, we'll go through an overview of a lot of the same thing again that you heard from the board. If there are adjustments that we hear, it's kind of hard because the state budget, the sequence doesn't work for us, right? When I say us schools, state budget's April. And here we are representing our budget now and kind of finalizing things. So I can't go on, we may have probably. So more than likely, what we presented, and I haven't heard of, nor am I seeking feedback, by the way. We haven't heard a lot, because I think we have a pretty good budget, that more likely what we presented back again on the 19th will be very similar thing. We go more abbreviated version. We'll go through every slide that we did last time, because you have heard it as a board several times over. But you'll have that. And if there are any changes, I'll point it out, and I'll give you one example that we know a change is going to happen. We had 17 retirees on that one slide. It's going to be 18, which is good, because at the same time, we're making some adjustment to special ed. If you remember, Mrs. Smilo was here, the age 22 effect. So we add in some staff and capacity for that. So the timing was great for those two things that happened. So I shared it. So it's a net zero effect, but it's the slide really different, because if you had, I thought this was 17, 18, it's a net zero effect on the budget. But those are the kind of things that I might point out differently from the board. Well, I just did it now, but in case I might do it again.
Thank you.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, so that's a wrap. No other comments before we move into
That's it.
You for good of the order? Okay, all right. So the next item up is, we don't have anything to vote on tonight. It's for good of the order, and this is an opportunity for board members to discuss salient matters or just give a shout out. Intervention.
Did you want that?
Did you have something you wanted to?
I just want to say that the musical was amazing. The high school production of Anything Goes. Congratulations to the director and everybody that was involved. It was a fantastic, fantastic performance. And my family and I were astonished that there were high schoolers. It was so good.
Right before the break for concessions, when that dance scene, I just thought, oh my words, how long?
There were like 30 kids on stage, like everybody was moving and no
tapping
one
and
bumped
singing.
into each other. I couldn't even.
I was exhausted watching it. It was really impressive, and I was really happy to see by the Saturday show, it was a full house. I knew that first night we were a little worried, but I agree. I echo congratulations to Mr. Gregg and Mr. Moon and the casting crew. They really pulled together a really, really good show. Anything else? So I just wanted to point out, Monday is the Science Honor Society induction ceremony. I do have a BOCES board meeting at that time, so
I probably won't be there. We have negotiations. Dr.
Oh,
Wilson
that's right.
Turner will be there and offering comments on my behalf.
And I think, Petra, you said you could go?
Yes.
Any,
I think so.
I don't know if anybody, if you could mention in the Friday bulletin too. But unfortunately, I can't make that. And I wanted to mention that we rescheduled the community conversation to this Saturday, the 16th, from 10 o'clock in the Scano Tasago cafeteria. And that's all I have. So,
Sounds good.
without further delay, can I have a motion to adjourn? First is Stacy, second is Petra. All in favor? It is 5 in favor. The meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
And if you could turn off your mics.
You feel better?
Yeah.